Well, Will, it's been a few weeks since we did our last podcast.
It's Chris, right? Hasn't been quite that long.
Yeah, if it's also maybe a sign of the fact that we've been either really busy or are getting very forgetful, one or the other.
Well, I think a lot of our viewers know I live 6 months of the year in Maui, and that suggests that I'm just laying around on the beach. I wish. I mean, Maui is great, but I've been writing four memoirs. Two of them are finished, and two are ongoing through the year. So I've been busy.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of doing the layout work and the cover for you on a couple of yours, and the joy of that is I'm doing the layout. Of course, I'm also reading the book,
Yeah,
and these stories are wonderful. And I think what strikes me as I read them, I mean, first of all, you've got a wonderful talent, but also just how amazing, remarkable, and powerful an everyday person is when they tell their story.
it's
It's
just remarkable, Chris. I know you know this, but the deeper I get into this memoir thing, the more I understand the gravity of truth. Like
mm,
my favorite movies have often been, based on a true story. But when you have an actual true story, it's not based on a true story, it is the true story.
right.
It is just phenomenal how the most mundane circumstances that are like unheroic, they're just like everyday things, carry a weight and significance that you cannot get with fiction. Well, like
Yeah.
one of the bylines I've thought of as we, wrap up doing more of this is better than fiction.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, yeah. That's really well said because I think as you're bringing it up, I think part of what it is too. I've had the joy of doing a couple of biographies as well, and the the thing that strikes me is that part of what brings that additional, I don't know, oomph or meaning to the story is the perspective.
Yeah,
When it was happening, they maybe didn't understand where that ended up leading to
right.
and what was the through line that was actually being, actualized as they moved along throughout their life. And now, as they're looking back, regardless of where they are in their life, but a lot of times people are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, or beyond, they're looking at this from a whole other perspective and realizing that when this happened, they now understand it so much better. And so that seemingly ordinary moment could have been pivotal.
Well, and especially troublesome memories. The other day, this a little while ago, I happened to mention a childhood memory to a friend. And this was a memory of my dad verbally abusing me.
Mm.
It's something he used to say when I was a kid. And I carried, a heavy memory of that. Well, I mentioned it to my friend, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, well, he was just trying to help you." And I
Yeah.
went, "What?" And the combination of me visiting that memory from today with a more mature consciousness, but my friend's input totally illuminated that memory, and almost magically the trauma associated with it just dissolved. And I went, "Yeah, that's right. I took it a certain way. My dad meant it an entirely different way."
Yeah, boy, that is the power of perspective and a few years between sometimes. I mean, you and I have played with the story. I mean, you've written, I think, 25 books, if not more. I have not written near that many, but worked on a lot of screenplays and movies, and both of us have come to really appreciate the power of story, right? So much so that in our coaching and our corporate work, we really began to see how helping leaders and employees in a company become very aware of the power of story and how it was impacting them as they lived out their day and week and month. So they became very conscious of the story they're creating. And I remember very specifically. the day when we were on a call together and you said something like, I've got this great idea about how we can help people create a thriving zone for
And,
themselves. And, you know, your focus at that point, you got really fascinated about helping people really begin to consciously create a third act in their life
yeah.
that brought all of what their experience had been into this place of deeper meaning. Why don't you talk a little bit about that third act? Because I know you also got some great coaching from a screenwriter and came to really appreciate this third three act process.
Well, first, I want to just hats off to you. I remember a moment when we were starting writing our book where you said, we were talking about stories, and you said, we're wired for stories.
Mm,
And it was the way you said it, it was like, oh, wow, it's not optional. If you're human, you're telling stories, and maybe not verbally, but we're living in the story of our life. And I've never forgotten that. That's so insightful. So it's not optional. We are living in stories. The question is, what kind of story? And of course, the second thing is we have the ability to examine the story we're living in and change it.
hmm
We have agency to do that. Now, as far as the third act goes, you're referring kind of to the standard three act structure in storytelling and screenplays, dating way back to Aristotle. And in the modern era, refined by Joseph Campbell in his work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which was further refined by Chris Vogler, who worked in Disney. And I had the privilege of working with him on my screenplay years ago. He wrote a memo in 1989, I think, 7-page memo on the hero's journey. And it got circulated. Steven Spielberg, all the top guys in Hollywood saw it, and it went viral. And it articulated there, I think there's 11 points in the hero's journey, up and down, up and down. But the three acts refer to leaving your familiar world, going into what they call, in the mythic sense, the underworld, doing all your work, meeting the dragons, all the challenges, uh, gaining new strength. And then the third act is returning, as Joseph Campbell said, with the elixir to heal the kingdom. Now, that's pretty high blown language. It simply means, what did I learn in my life? What's the meaning? What are the gifts I can bring that help other people? Now, in the writing I've done, helping people write their life story, the third act is often missing. It's not there yet. And so I've seen how the act of writing the memoir, helping someone write it, is really to graduate their life story into the third act, which is where the meaning emerges and they go, oh, wait, this is why I'm here. These are my gifts. Wow. It's that revelation of meaning. So yeah, now I'm convinced everybody in some form or another needs to review their life, whether it's a diary, just scribbling a little memoir for themselves, or working with people like us to help them write it and get it published. It's mainly for them themselves. And then other people read it and there's value. But what an exercise to examine our lives. As Socrates said, the unexamined life isn't worth living. So that's what we're doing. We're examining our lives.
Yeah, as you talk about the bringing the elixir to the kingdom, I can remember this might have been in response to the Chris Vogler memo, which everybody got. I remember reading it as well, and I think it was my right-hand guy, Michael Green, wonderfully talented former agent and producer, who said, to understand that, we have to understand that in order for the kingdom to work for, in order for the elixir to work for the kingdom, it has to work for the king first. And
Whoa.
yeah, and his point was is
Wow.
the first person who gets healed by the elixir is the person themselves.
Wow.
And in that process, they are then able to emanate that or radiate that out to the people in their lives. And so, yeah, that kind of gave it a whole other perspective for me. I remember that conversation in our office there in LA. And as you're talking about the value of this for a person, I think, once we start to realize that 3x structure, when it was originally developed, was based on the observation of people's lives, that
Yeah,
that's kind of the eras, you could say, the eras we go through in our life to
yeah.
where we arrive at this place where suddenly the meaning starts to become clear, the through line, the purpose. And so you and I have talked about with working with people on memoirs that part of what we do as they go through this is we add an additional feature that not every memoir author does, and that is we've coached people for years.
Hmm.
And so we include in that process this additional element of coaching them to really help them become clear on identifying and maybe purposely infusing the meaning that
Yeah.
they want their life to have into their story going forward, but also retrospectively looking back.
Well,
I think there's something so powerful in that.
you're right. And the tragedy is when people get kind of suffocated in their negative self-talk about their past. We just had a good friend end her life,
Mm,
and her partner
yeah.
found her journal. And in reading her journal, he saw how she was tortured by
Mm,
self-judgment. And he read a
wow.
little bit of it to me. And I mean, I wept
Mm,
because what she was writing in judgment of herself, I knew the gift that she'd been giving to all of us. She couldn't see it. She only saw
yeah.
the darkness. And so this was a tragedy in our community. And it made me wonder how many people are walking around with this negative story about their past. This person felt that she screwed up constantly, that every moment of her life was a screw up. It's incredible. So if a person doesn't examine their life through the lens of the hero, this is the key thing. Heroes, who would be interested in watching a film where the hero never faced any challenges? I mean, it'd be a snooze fest. The hero also always goes through doubt. They usually refuse the offer at the beginning. That's typically called the refusal of the call. No, not me. I can't do it. Pick somebody else. I'm not. So if a person learns with help to see their life through the lens of the hero and the hero's journey, then they'll go, oh, of course I screwed up. I was learning. I did better the next time. And then I screwed up again. And then I made this mistake. And then I did this thing great. But it becomes part of a mosaic rather than just all this negativity about how, terrible I was. No, you're a hero in training.
Yeah, that's such a great way to say it. And I happen to know, not nearly as well as you, but just tangentially the person you were referring to. And I would have never guessed
Yeah.
that she felt that way about herself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, she was such a remarkable person. Everybody who came in contact with her that I knew was so moved by her.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think, you know, for anyone to gain perspective and a better understanding of the value of their life experience,
Yeah.
there's always lessons that we can share. Each of us can go back. I can certainly go back in my life and go, "Oh my gosh, I wish I would have done that so differently."
Yeah.
Well, I can't change the past, but I certainly can let it influence my third act, right?
Well, and a really interesting element is the concept of contracts, that we have contracts with everybody we know,
Mm,
parents, siblings, friends, and the contracts are of a certain nature. Like I have a former wife. We actually signed a contract. We got married. Well, then we terminated that
mm,
contract. That's called a divorce. And we're still on good terms, fortunately. You are too with an ex that you have. A lot of people don't terminate their contracts very well, especially when they're not officially recognized. So somebody maybe had a boyfriend when they were 17 and it ended poorly. Well, now they're 60 and they have troubling memories about that relationship. Well, they haven't completed the contract, which is as simple as examining the memory and going, okay, he did that, I did that, she did that, I did that. That was then, this is now. I'm grateful for the experience. I apologize for anything I did that hurt anybody. I ask for forgiveness. I forgive myself. I'm grateful for the experience. Here's what I learned. Moving on. Check.
Yeah, yeah, and I think something so valuable is that in that process, the other person doesn't need to be literally involved.
Yep.
And I was just watching a program the other day where a therapist was talking about she's considered to be avant-garde somewhat. I don't think so, but then again, in any case, she was talking about the power of reframing and kind of almost like re-experiencing a past situation.
Yeah.
And I've shared this with you before of an experiment I did at the guidance of a therapist who suggested that there was one particular moment in time that I remembered. It was kind of a real critical moment for me as a young person. I think I was 18. And she guided me to go back in my imagination as me from the future, from my perspective now,
Right.
into the room with that 18-year-old young man who was so questioning his own value, and to be able to say, "Hey, guess what? We
Mhm.
actually made it. We survived. Guess what I'm doing now, you know?" And hang in there. It's all gonna turn out, or you know, we've got new tools, to work with. It was really interesting because, and I've heard multiple people describe this since who've experienced this process that we also uh, can do with people, is they go through that process, they imagine that, and suddenly it's almost as if there's this time shift, as
Yeah.
if that actually happened.
Yeah.
And our mind is a wonderful thing that way. It reorders that memory
Yeah.
in such a way that suddenly, just like what happened with you and your dad,
Mm.
saying something that was harsh to you, all of a sudden that new perspective reframes that entire experience and its impact on you.
Well, it's an amazing technique. And there are hundreds of versions. People do this different ways, but the one that we've really played with is reframing. And sometimes I describe it as assigning a new emotion to an old memory. You can't change the memory. Like it happened. You probably don't remember it exactly as it happened, but uh, we have a feeling connected with a good example. And I've told you this, I'll abbreviate it. Um, I had an episode when I was 9 or 10 on a family vacation where I spilled a lot of food that I was delivering to my hungry family, and it was very embarrassing. I tipped over, tripped food on the floor, and everybody laughed at me. So now the emotion connected, anchored to that memory was humiliation. I wanted to find a hole and disappear into it. So when I looked at that memory using this technique, I went, okay, how can I reframe that? And so what I did is I went, well, I was a young comedian and I came up with a gag that made everybody laugh. It worked. And so when I ran that memory again, like a film, rewinding and looking at it, everything happened the same. I dropped the food, everybody laughed at me, but this time I felt pride. I made them laugh. And I added taking a bow. Now, I had to do that probably 40, 50 times. And at one point, it tipped. I remember it clearly. And from that moment on, whenever I remember that episode from my childhood, I feel this immediate flush of pride, which is opposite of what I used to feel. So that's a good example of how this works.
That's a really great example. I've shared this before when I think of you going through that process is that, you know, just a side note, you also went on to write jokes for a comedian. So, uh,
Right.
so it's funny. Well, as you share that, and we're talking about this ability to reframe the past and actually be able to start to intentionally, purposefully focus on creating the third act rather to our life story as we're living it out, and to live it out with intention and be able to really understand. This is one of the things that I think our thriving process comes in particularly handy, is helping people understand how the power of intention really works. In the app that we had running for a long time, still on our website, but there was a process we used where you thought of your life as an episodic,
Right.
like a long running TV series, right? And that
Right.
every day was an episode.
Right.
And so you would get up at the beginning like the writer, director, and lead actor of that episode and go, so how do I want this to play out today?
Right.
And carry that intention into the day. And at the end of the day, the same way you would, in a TV series, you review, how did it go? Do we need to reshoot this tomorrow? I've shared before how my brother and his family started to play with this, and they actually started to have fun with it. That if a moment kind of started to go sideways in their family, anybody could yell "cut." Let's do another take on that. And then they'd
Right.
focus on how do they want this moment to play out. And so, using some of those techniques as well to help create that third act that we really want are some of the things that we can do, through the coaching process. But
Well, and if you think about it, and you've got a deep background in film minus more television, the number one goal is you don't want to be canceled. Like you want your show to be picked up for another season. So like looking at it this way, how entertaining is my life story for other people? Like, am I a boring person? Kind of. And none of us are boring, essentially. We're all fascinating people. This thing you mentioned about intention, it's you can look at that from a number of angles. A lot of people really are hard on themselves. They get into this intention thing and they go, well, I had this intention and I didn't create it. I failed. I wanted to do this and it didn't turn out. Well, there's a great scene in the film Semi Tough with Burt Reynolds, Chris Christopherson, and Jill Clayburgh. And it's right at the beginning. Jill Clayburgh is returning from a trip to Africa and she shows her pictures that she took. She fancies herself as a photographer to Chris Christopherson. And you kind of see one picture after another, and she's going, I'm a terrible photographer. Look at this. The giraffe is behind the trees. You can't see him. And Chris goes, well, it's a great picture of the trees. And she shows him another one. There's a lion, and he's hidden behind a tree. She says, see, there's another one. I want to take the picture of the lion. And he says to her, yeah, but you took pictures of trees. And it's a brilliant reframe because he helps her realize that she was very successful at taking pictures of trees, not taking pictures of animals, and that she should celebrate what she did right. It's a little bit of a gimmick, but we get to make up the rules on how we tell our story. And why wouldn't we reframe things in a way that made us feel better about ourselves, happier, and like Jill was learning that she needed to focus differently to get the animals. So she got something out of it. But isn't that an interesting way to look at that?
that is, we were just on a call, you and I, with a new client for whom we're going to work with her on her memoir. And one of the things we talked with her about is that in her story, sometimes it's really helpful to actually, at the beginning of a chapter, for example, or a section within a chapter, to intentionally be looking at it through the current lens of understanding
From today.
from
Yeah.
today, yeah, about this past event, sharing what was going on in that event, but suddenly it has a different context because there's this other thread that's been woven through the fabric. And I think a lot of times that's the other thing that's beautiful about a memoir is we can also help people see the beauty. We can be the Chris Christopherson. We can help the
Yeah.
person see the meaning or the purpose or help them find the thread the through line, so that that process of writing a memoir, like you said, whether anybody reads it or not, the journey of, you know, exploring one's life, with the help of people as you and I happen to be both writers and coaches is kind of extraordinary. And I I think, you know, through your experience with you having written so many biographies, uh, you brought up this idea of kind of an offshoot of our thriving practice of helping people write meaningful memoirs about
Well,
their
yeah,
life.
and the elephant in the room here, which we better address, most people hate writing. I mean, I have friends who are best-selling authors, and I'm talking New York Times best-selling authors who hate writing. They dread it. Well, some people like writing. We do. I love writing. And so the people we work with, we got different levels. If somebody wants to write, great, we'll just coach them. If they hate writing, we can do the writing for them. But it takes that out of the picture. So I just wanted viewers to be a little bit relieved if they're thinking that this sounds like a good idea. Not everybody loves to write, and that's okay. You can still have a memoir.
Well, and really good point. And I think even as well, some people love to write, but they're just not that skilled at it. They haven't
Yeah,
developed the skill. And so the
yeah,
beauty of that is, they can play a major role in laying out the story and writing. The beauty is both of us have, through various forms, helped, you know, have stories play out, and we can then play that role where we come in as kind of the senior writer, if you will,
yeah.
who helps take it to another level that not only is more enjoyable for whoever reads it, but that takes them through that process we're talking through of a new lens,
Well,
meaning and purpose and through lines.
there's also the phenomena, which we've both experienced, of emergent revelations, like something that just pops up in the dialogue. As we get to know a client, kind of learn their voice and help them write their true voice, often out of left field, some insight shows up and takes form. I had this happen with a client. I'm working on her memoir right now, and she was a minor celebrity in Hollywood. And part of her book is addressing the millions of people who never made it, like who didn't become Academy Award winning actresses, like she never did, and yet still had good lives, like she's had a magical life. And so we're working along actually for a couple of months. And suddenly out of nowhere, I remember we were on a Zoom call. I just looked at her and I said, "Oh, it was never about getting the spotlight to shine on you. It was about you shining your spotlight into the world." And, and she just went, "What?" And that was exactly it. That her desire to be on stage, which she had from birth, wasn't because she wanted to be famous, but because she shines and she loves to share her light with the world. So that one line came out of left field and she went, "That's it. That's the key theme in the book right there." So that's the other phenomena in collaborating on a memoir. Wisdom like that can just show up.
Yeah, and I think there's something so great about other people's perspective. You're particularly good at not only being open to those kind of insights, but you also ask great questions. And I think, part of our job in helping somebody, unearth and tell their story in this really meaningful, purposeful way is being able to ask questions about something that they would have maybe never even thought to ask.
True.
And
Totally.
and out
Totally.
of that question, something like what you just described can emerge. So it's for me as somebody who loves stories. I've shared this with you before. I used to make up stories. I had this own detective series when I was 10 and 11 years old. I would make up this whole episodic series, and then I would talk the neighborhood kids into coming over to the house, and we would do the episode, right? And we would act out the parts, and there was a lot of improv that went on as well. But just there's something about a story that can be so captivating. And as you said, the seemingly mundane details of people's lives, when they're looked at with a little bit of help to unearth the deeper, meaning that's there. I've yet to hear anybody's story that once you start asking the right questions, you find that this story that they didn't even maybe realize was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
Suddenly they realize, oh my gosh, that is an amazing story. I never looked at it that way.
Well, and that's because often the meaning is down two or three layers, and people are not accustomed to somebody asking them deep questions. I mean, to me, and I did a lot of interview work, so I was asking questions of my guests on for TV shows. It's the second or third question where you get to the meat under the surface. And quite often, a person may ask one question, they get an answer, they move on to something else. And in conversation, often people aren't really listening. They're hearing through a filter, and they can hardly wait to volunteer their own story that's just like the one they heard. It's very different when someone's listening, deeply listening, asks a question, and then says, well, can you say more about that? And what about that? It's a shock to some people because they've never been invited to go that deep. And that's when they start to discover this gold, it's buried treasure. And we all go, holy cow, that was remarkable. And they go, I guess it was. I didn't really realize it at the time.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, how many of us have an audience that's truly interested and willing not only to listen, but to your point, to ask the questions that help uncover the gold that's in there that they maybe didn't even realize is there. That's such a great point. And I'm actually excited to kind of talk about this offshoot that we've created. Uh, we've got a new website that's part of our cadre of services called meaningfulmemoirs.com. And it's just a beginning website where we're kind of putting it out there for people to be able to really consider, wow, maybe that's something I would like to actually explore. Uh, can we publish the book? Sometimes, absolutely, if the person wants to and is willing to go through that full process, sure. Will a ton of people read it? Maybe not, maybe. But the more important thing, and you brought this up, is it is the process of doing it that is so revealing.
Yeah.
And you and I are experimenting on ourselves right now, by doing the interview process with each other
We're doing our
during the
program
week.
for ourselves before we inflict it on anyone else.
Well, I'm glad we are. It's interesting because you've again written a lot of biographies. I've written a few and done a lot of other stories, but there is something that I've never been through the process that you and I are engaging in, where we're really going deep on telling the stories, but also just the process where you start to realize, oh my gosh, I never thought of this that way.
Yeah.
And so, we're really inviting people to reach out and, explore this process with us for themselves, for a family member. You know,
Well,
uh,
Chris, do you know the first memoir that I ever wrote?
no, I don't think I do.
It's for my mother.
Really?
She kept a diary all her life, and at some point, 5 years or so before she died, she asked if I would help her assemble it into a book. And so I did. A couple of hundred pages, 250 photographs in there. It's called The Life and Times of Hazel Wilkinson. Picture on the cover of her at age 22 playing the accordion. We printed that up and gave it as a Christmas gift to every family member. And I'm telling you, even the grandchildren, 5 years, 6 years old, this was their favorite gift that year. And they just were sitting there mesmerized to see grandma at age 20, to see me as a baby. And that book sits on my shelf just behind my shoulder here. And I open it probably a couple of times a month and leaf through it, see pictures of myself when I was born, read about how my mom and dad met. And I often find myself in tears. And I
Mm,
talk to my two brothers and they say, this is the greatest treasure that our family has. Because she's been gone 15 years, my dad's been gone 20 years. They live on in that memoir. So this is another aspect of value here that putting this into print, and like I said, we printed up 25 copies. It didn't go out to anyone else. Someone else may want it to go out to a larger field, but to have a memory record like that for the family is just invaluable.
mm. I didn't know about that. I'm so glad you shared that because, yeah, I even think about my mom didn't write a memoir or keep a diary, but she did something similar. She, in her last couple of years, put together a book of the pictures and little storiettes,
Yeah.
of different aspects of her life. And it is still one of my favorite things to pull out, from time to time and just look through it and read it. So, it's definitely there's value to other people, however large or small that group may be. But I think the other thing is, anybody who's rounded third and is heading for home in the baseball game of life, um, or as Jonathan Winters used to joke, uh, we were friends with him, and one of my buddies was real close friends with him, and he would always say, "Mr. Aguirre, we're now in the fourth quarter."
Yeah. Right.
And it was it was really, just kind of poignant to recognize that, okay, I'm rounding third, I'm heading for home. And so now, not only do I get to decide how I arrive at home plate, or what I do in that fourth quarter of the game of life, but, you know, it's almost as if you get to go back into the team room where you meet, review the game thus far and
Well,
decide what's the strategy going to be for the fourth quarter.
is so important, Chris. And again, my mother has been a real inspiration to me in this. I was with her in the hospice for the 3 days before she died, and she had so many regrets about her life, and it was heartbreaking to be with her and think, God, if only I'd known all this and been able to help her come to terms with her life. She was, I wish I'd done this. I wish I hadn't done this. Oh, I could have done that. And she really inspired me. I can see that now to do what we're doing today. Uh, can we come to that final moment unburdened by our memories?
Mm,
And I don't believe we can unless we address them. So then the question is, how many people are doing that? And my answer is almost nobody.
yeah.
Almost nobody. But Socrates said, the unexamined life isn't worth living. Who's examining their lives? So that's really the core of what we're offering. People can do it on their own. We're not just trying to drum up business. It's to inspire people to examine their lives and deal with whatever memories that are there that are troubling them so that and to celebrate the ones that are great so that as they move towards, the final moments, they're going, you know what? It's been a great life. It's been, in fact, we encourage people to start by picking one word. And I'd actually invite our viewers, listeners to do that. What's one word that describes your life? Like you and I did this with each other when we started our process. And mine is wonderful. And I think yours is Remarkable?
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said I've had a remarkable life, and I've said I've had a wonderful life. Well, viewers, listeners, do that. Pick a word. What is the word that would describe your life? And then begin seeing your whole life through that lens. It's a phenomenal exercise.
It's interesting. I did this exercise with somebody after you and I did it, and the word they chose for themselves was troublesome.
Ah,
And it was interesting. So I said, troublesome life. And I said, what word would you like to use to describe your life if you were able to, in this final chapter or act of your life, change things? And they stopped for a minute and were like, transformational.
whoa.
So like, you're talking about your mother. Again, it's that same thing. Okay, maybe I see my life as troublesome, or as we were talking about, the friend who recently passed, who saw her life as being that she wasn't valuable or that she did everything wrong. But in that moment of, but how could this third act turn out to be with a whole other focus and direction? And, we had talked about this, as coaches, we were able to look at things through that lens. And you were talking about the idea that, one thing that can be really helpful as we train more people to do what it is we do over the coming times here to expand this. And part of that is to be able to have coaches who have clients, uh, work with us, and we can work with them to develop this ability as well to learn the art of coaching someone's life story out of them. Because it's not just them writing it down or,
Yeah.
you know, telling it. It's being able to help them, like you said, with your client. All of a sudden, you had an epiphany that shined a new light on what she was doing. So, if you're a coach and you want a new kind of angle to be able to offer that's a valuable service to your clients, whether they be professional clients or personal clients, reach out to us. We'd love to work with you in helping you learn how to do this because it is such a valuable service uh, to the people you'll work with and the people in their lives, and if it's their company, the people they work with in their company. Uh,
Thank you.
it's yeah,
That's just exactly what I wanted to say too, Chris, because I am seeing a tsunami of interest. I mean, I'm seeing that this idea of reviewing your life in some form or another, and I think there's innumerable forms, will become part of end of life care. Just like having a will, medical directive, planning a memorial service, reviewing your life, I think will take its position on that list and a prominent position. So thanks, because we do want to have a shout out here to coaches because we need help. We need help to train people to help assist clients with preparing for their third act. And I want to share a great secret. You know this, I know this, a lot of people don't know this. The way a story ends is how it's remembered. A film can suck for an hour. If the last 10 minutes are superb, people will walk out of the theater or shut down Netflix and they'll say, that was a pretty good film. They'll go, yeah, it was kind of slow in the beginning. How the story ends is how it's remembered. So somebody listening to this, watching this could go, well, my life has kind of sucked. It's been mediocre, blah, blah, blah. Well, a lot of that is self-judgment. We can help them see it differently. However, they could go, well, okay, even if 10% of that is true, how can it end? How can I create a kick-ass ending? Because how the story ends is how it's remembered. So all of us, as long as we're breathing, have the opportunity to create a memorable life in the third act.
yeah, no, very well said. And I think you were talking about coaches, which absolutely is true. That's an area we understand really well. I was mentioning this to a friend the other day, and they said, "Oh, financial planners. You know,
Right.
it was like end of life planners, you should be talking to these people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whoever you are, if you think this would add value to the service you provide, please reach out. Go to our website at www.meaningfulmemoirs.com. Um, and reach out and let's have a conversation because yes, we love to do this, and it's part of the offerings we do as our professional life, but we're also passionate about it on more of a missional basis, I think you could say, to really encourage the practice itself to become something that's meaningful and real in people's lives. So, thrilled to have you joining us in this podcast. One that reawakens our podcast gene and to uh, you know learn a little bit more about what we're now including in our repertoire of services. And we'd love to work with you if you're somebody who thinks, wow, me or this friend of mine or this our family member really needs to get in touch, reach out.
Absolutely. And we scale what we're offering to anybody's resources, time and money. We just want to help people. And words are magical. That's why we call it spelling.
That's
That's
right.
no accident.
That's
Words
true.
properly or letters properly arranged is called spelling. So all of us are living in the spell of the story of our lives. And some of those spells need to be unspelled because they're not good spells. And we can create better ones with words. So, yeah, would love to help anyone who's interested or refer a friend. We're going to be doing this for the duration.
Yeah. All right, Will. Great to catch up in this
Yeah,
podcast format again. And to everybody else, wishing you well. May your story be one that people long to tell in the best of ways.
cool. Well, thanks, Chris.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao.